I'm in one of those moods where I really can't even stand myself. I'm irritated at myself too.
I've had those moods where I can't stand you. I know what you're talking about. I hope you're recording this. It is Thursday, March 19th. I am here with the lovely Cha-Cha and the equally lovely Anna Navarro.
Can you just wipe the optimism and happiness away from your voice?
You are so dark.
I am irritated with the world today.
Yes.
I am.
All right.
I mean, we're at war. Everything is a nightmare. It is a dystopian nightmare outside these doors.
You know, people often ask me, why do I have joy on Tuesday and you on Thursday? And yesterday I had joy on Wednesday and you today. And now I remember why, because it's too much for me. Both of you being irritated back to back, it's too much for the podcast. No. But all right, of all the things, I'm going to give you some things to be irritated about, and you just let it loose, okay? Here's where we go. Trump's pick to replace Kristi Noem as DHS secretary. Markwayne Mullin has been in the hot seat as he goes through the Senate confirmation hearings for the role. Did you see any of the testimony that he gave yesterday and any of the...
That's part of why I'm in this mood, because I saw hours of congressional testimony of Mullin and then of Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, I don't know which of the two is more unqualified and just scary to think that they're leading departments. So yes, I saw some of the Mullin testimony. First, let's just begin by the obvious. He is not the sharpest knife in the drawer. In fact, I think I can safely say he might be the dullest knife in the drawer. And what I was not ready for was the back and forth between him and Rand Paul, who happens to be the chair of the committee
that was fascinating.
Of jurisdiction. And Mullin, and remember, Rand Paul is a libertarian, but he's a Republican. And remember, he got the living bejesus beat out of him by his neighbor.
Yes.
And apparently Mullin had been celebrating it and saying, good, he deserved it. And man, does karma come back, because Rand Paul came back for him hard and confronted him with the things he had said, and basically said to him, we can't have somebody with anger issues leading DHS. And I think he's right. And it's not just, what he said about Rand Paul. And what happened to Rand Paul was horrible.
It was.
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Rand Paul's either, but this guy had ribs broken. I mean, he was in excruciating pain, and it was a very serious assault, and it was awful. I wonder if his neighbor sold the house. I'm wondering now. But anyways, back to Markwayne. You should never trust anybody with so many first names. What's his name?
Markwayne Mullin. Yes.
Okay, that in itself makes me suspicious of the man's qualifications. But, Rand Paul started listing all of these other instances of violence. And, there was the one where he was in the middle of a congressional, he was in the middle of a Senate hearing, and he got up and was going to beat up the guy testifying.
The labor leader. And they're friends now.
And Bernie Sanders, out of all people, 85-year-old Bernie Sanders, who looks like he hasn't punched anything in his life, is trying to break up the potential fight between these two guys. So, so I think this guy's qualification is that every time you turn on TV, every time you've turned on TV for the last year, you see Markwayne Mullin on CNN or wherever else defending Trump. But in his defense of Trump, he really says stupid things because we can't blame it on senility with him, but he makes so many factual mistakes when he speaks that it's a little concerning. One of the things he said was that he wants the department to be off the headlines, to be out of the headlines. Obviously, there's been horrible headlines involving DHS and ICE in particular since the Trump administration took over. And if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, we heard reporting that, the pollsters of the White House, and the White House was telling Republicans running for office that they needed to basically erase the words mass deportation from their campaigns, to not talk about it, not tout it, not be proud of it, not boast about the mass deportations that have happened. They want us to forget Nicole Good. They want us to forget Alex Preddy. They want us to forget the little 5-year-old with the blue knit cap, Liam Ramos, who was used as bait to lure his parents out and then was sent to a detention center. They want us to forget the teacher's aide who was shot 5 times in Chicago, U.S. citizen. They want us to forget the young man they killed in Padre Island in Texas. They want us to forget the 3,800 children they have sent to this detention center in San Antonio. They want us to forget the mariachi boys who were unjustifiably detained. But the American people aren't stupid, and we're not going to forget. And I'm going to talk about it every time somebody puts a mic in front of me, because what they have done, the level of violation of civil rights, of human rights abuses, the cruelty, the performative insanity that we have seen from that department for the last year, we're not going to forget just because it is an election coming up and they want us to forget.
Speaking of the war in Iran, how do you think this war is being handled in the court of public opinion with the vice president yesterday? Because obviously the impacts of this war financially are huge. And I am getting kind of a deja vu from when in the Biden administration, people were talking about how the economy was fundamentally good, but people weren't feeling that way. Now it's the people that were accusing Biden of being out of touch are making the same comments. So Vance yesterday, the vice president, said rising gas prices are a temporary blip and we shouldn't worry about it.
They're so damn nonchalant about people's pain, right? Because what Vance doesn't understand, with what I found to be a very flippant comment, is that there are people in this country. There are a lot of people in this country, perhaps not at Mar-a-Lago, perhaps not in Donald Trump's cabinet, which is loaded with billionaires. But there's a lot of people in this country for whom the higher gas prices, which in turn affect higher prices on everything, right?
Right.
Anything you order on Amazon right now has a surcharge. Anything you buy in the grocery store has higher transportation costs and is costing you more. Any delivery, anything is affected. Anything and everything is affected by higher transportation costs. And so what J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, who lives in this billionaire bubble, does not understand is that this is not like, billionaires with stocks in the market who can wait out a blip. No, there are people for whom the difference of $20 in their gas tank every time they fill it up means that they're not going to be able to afford other things. There are people for whom all of these higher prices on consumer goods, on gas, on all of these things makes the difference, makes or break whether they can afford to live that month. And they're going to have to make cuts on what they feed their families, on what medications they take in order to afford these higher prices. And so these flippant Trump people who just call it a blip don't take into consideration the huge amount of Americans that live paycheck to paycheck and that are making every cent count. And that this higher price on everything as a result of the higher price on gas is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back for them, and that they don't have a month or 2 months or 3 months in reserve to wait for this administration to get their act together in this war, which feels to me like it's being run by the Keystone Cops. And some of the harm now, some of the infrastructure damage that has been caused in Iran, in Qatar, number one, it's an escalation of this war. So this is, stop telling me this is an excursion, Donald Trump. No, this is not the excursion I take when I get off my cruise ship. This is a full-on war that is escalating in front of our eyes and is causing damage that is not going to get rebuilt in a week or a month or a year. I mean, that damage caused to that liquefied natural gas, that LNG plant in that little island, it took over a decade to build that stuff. They're the largest providers. Iran and Qatar are the largest providers of liquefied natural gas in the world. Do you know who the third provider is? Largest provider?
Is it us?
No, it's Russia.
Oh.
So you know who benefits from the price of LNG going way up and Iran and Qatar's ability to provide it being impeded?
Vladimir
Russia.
Putin. Yeah.
Vladimir Putin. Yeah, and while we're out here, another thing that I think does not get talked about is while the U.S. is out here playing battleship and video game war in Iran, everybody's forgotten Ukraine. Those poor people are still getting bombed and killed on a daily basis. And what we have just done is embolden and strengthen the guy who invaded them, Putin. So we are leaving Ukraine out to, dry and to hang and dry. What's the saying? I never get it right.
Leaving them out to dry.
We're leaving them out to dry. And in the meantime, we're starting a new war. We've started a new war with, I don't know what purpose. I don't know.
You have your own podcast. What do you do in those moments when you don't know the expression or the pop culture reference without me there?
I just butcher it.
Yeah. Okay.
I those are the hardest things to get down in a different language.
Mm-hmm.
Is the sayings and the expressions, and I screw them up all the time. I've been here 47 years. I'm still screwing them up. Like there's one that always gets me. I always get the order wrong.
Yeah.
The one that's like there's a sinker, a hook, and a line.
Hook, line, and sinker.
Hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
Okay. And yesterday you were talking to me about there was a word I had never heard.
Yes.
I said something about.
Oh, it was about because on Friday's show, Lara Spencer's on for her show about thrifting, and you kept saying it's a show about grifting, and I said Lara Spencer, not a grifter that I'm aware of, but she is a thrifter. So there you go. Yeah.
So I did not know thrifting was a verb. I've seen thrift shops.
Yes.
I didn't know there was a verb called thrifting.
Thrifting. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, grifting's a whole other thing. All right, moving on. I'm sorry, and that was a odd segue, but I do want to talk about this New York Times bombshell investigation. You've been talking about it for a couple of days. We haven't had a chance to talk about it on the show yet, but I'm sure we'll get there. They have extensive evidence that civil rights leader, icon really, Cesar Chavez, has allegedly groomed and sexually abused girls who worked in his movement for years. He's obviously passed away, but this has shocked a lot of people. What's your reaction to it?
Oh, God. I'm just so shocked, horrified. I feel so bad on so many different levels about this.
Yeah.
First, as you know, Cesar Chavez's granddaughter, Julie Rodriguez Chavez, who was the highest Latino that's ever worked in a White House, who worked under Biden, is a close friend of mine. And she'd called me a couple of days before this broke to tell me that this was brewing and just, talk it out with her friend. So I was in shock. I remember I came in the next day and I told you about it.
Yep.
So this was before the New York Times story broke. But when I read the New York Times story, it was far, far worse than I had imagined. And it just, first thing I can tell you is my heart broke for those two young girls who looked up to this man. One of them was as young as 12. The other one was 15 years old, Ana Murguia and Deborah Rojas. And that part was just so, it was so disgusting. And to think about the harm that was caused to those girls and how long they lived with it. And there's this common thread, right? Whether it's Epstein, whether it's Cesar Chavez, and it's powerful men who think they can get away with things and who feel entitled to do things that are just horrible and unacceptable. But it's not only the powerful men; it's the people around them that enabled it.
Yeah.
Because in this New York Times story, these young girls at the time, women now, talk about going past his secretary, that he would summon them. They would walk past his secretary and go into his office, which he would then lock. They talked about bodyguards being outside of the motel as he raped them, as he raped one of them. So again, it's powerful men doing horrible things, getting away with it for years, and the people around them who look the other way and enable them. So and that's, by the way, whether it's Catholic priests or whether it's Jeffrey Epstein or whether it's Cesar Chavez. Now, saying that hurts my heart
Yeah.
because he is the beloved grandfather of my friend who is devastated. This is a man who practically raised her, who, and she's devastated for these victims. She's devastated for what this means for about the man that was her father figure, that was such a huge part of her life. And I'm also devastated for what this means for the movement, the civil rights movement
Right.
that he advocated for, and the things that he accomplished in his life at a time when the Latino community so desperately needs heroes and needs leaders. Cesar Chavez, that I can think of, is practically the only Latino leader whose name comes to mind when I think of buildings and statues that are
Schools
all
named
over
for him and roads.
all
Yeah.
over the country, roads,
Yeah.
boulevards, streets, all over the country. There's things named for him. There's a park. There's celebration
Yeah.
days, which are coming up at the end of this month, and that's the only person, the Latino I can think of, who has that level of recognition. And we are justifiably so about to lose that. And so it's shocking when you hear that somebody you thought was a legend, an icon, had done so many good things, when you find out that they were doing this to little girls. But I go back to saying it is important that we call out those we
100%.
don't know.
Yeah.
And those we do know, that we call out those that we don't like and those that we do like. And so, if you believe in accountability, it's gotta
across the
be
board.
Yeah, across the board, and you
Yeah.
hold everybody accountable. And I do want to say that there's a national sexual assault hotline. It's 800-656-4693. And I hope the only positive from this story for me is that despite the years that these girls swallowed this hurt and trauma for, they came out and they spoke. They found the courage to do so. So, I hope that the Me Too movement, I hope that the courage of the Epstein survivors, I hope that the courage now of these women, Ana Murguia and Deborah Rojas, and, there may be more, I hope it serves to give voice and strength to more women who may for decades have swallowed their pain.
Of course, I do have to say this is all according to New York Times reporting, and obviously you've had some conversations, but Chavez's family said to the Times that they were not in a position to judge the claims and called the allegations deeply painful to their family, saying, as a family steeped in the values of equity and justice, we honor the voices of those who feel unheard and who report sexual misconduct. So they did the right thing there too. Yeah.
Listen, when Julie Rodriguez Chavez, his granddaughter, was in the White House, and in every job, she was in the Obama White House before she was in the Biden White House, in every job she's had, she's been about giving voice to the voiceless and representing those that don't have a platform, and she's been about equity and equality. So I can only imagine how devastating this is, but it doesn't matter, and we have to somehow find a way with some of these icons and leaders who end up being flawed in this way, and it's more than flawed, right? This is criminal. This is not a flaw.
Yeah, this is unforgivable. It's true.
We have to find a way of
separating
the work from the man.
Yeah.
From the from the person.
And the United Farm Workers president, Teresa Romero, said the rape allegations against Chavez were very difficult to hear, and said, we do not condone the actions of Cesar Chavez. It's wrong. So people are calling it out, even people that kind of stand on the back of his accomplishments, like them. But and
the other thing is that he's been dead for 30 years.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean,
right? These things happened 50 years ago, and so it's and I think that makes reconciling even more difficult, because you can't hold him accountable anymore. You're holding his legacy accountable, and his legacy rests on his accomplishments. So I think it's, it's all of this conflict going on because of that. And I think that's part of the reason that these women were silent for so long, because they didn't want to harm his legacy and they didn't want to harm the movement. So I think to honor these women, we have to figure out how to separate one from the other. And I would say, there's a lot of people on the right who jumped on this. Okay, fine, jump on it. Nobody gets a pass. Nobody who's done something to, who sexually assaulted women, particularly minors, gets a pass ever, no matter if they're dead or alive. But I want the same energy on Epstein.
Yeah.
For whose victims we can do something.
Right.
Because there's still, let us not forget that there are still half of those Epstein files that are yet to be released by the Department of Justice. Let us remember that there's not a single person in those Epstein files other than Ghislaine Maxwell who has been prosecuted or investigated for this. And, Jeffrey Epstein, who is also dead. There's a lot of men in those files that should be held accountable, like they're doing in other countries, right? Like they're doing in places like Great Britain, but we are not doing
it here.
Yeah. So let the outrage and pain and hurt and anger we are feeling about these Cesar Chavez allegations serve to make us more committed to follow through and to not let go of the Epstein allegations. And the last thing I want to say on this, and this I say personally, and I said it to Julie on the phone, nothing that her grandfather did or allegedly did affects who Julie Rodriguez Chavez is as a person.
Of course.
And her own accomplishments and her own identity and her goodness and decency as a human being. So I can be horrified by Cesar Chavez. I'm still incredibly proud to be friends of Julie Rodriguez Chavez, his granddaughter.
All right, before we go, and you're being called to set, so before we go, no one flies more than Ana Navarro. Nobody is in the air more than Ana Navarro. Nobody goes through TSA more often than Ana Navarro. But for over a month now, TSA employees at airports have been coming to work and not getting paid since the government shutdown. Airport security lines are taking several hours to get through. What have you experienced? And I've seen messages you've put out asking for people to be kind and patient with what's happening.
Well, this for me is so painful because I go through basically the same TSA lines at practically the same hours in Miami and in New York. I know these people. I know their names. I know their stories. We talk as I'm going through the line. And a lot of them ask me, what are you hearing? Are we getting a vote? When is this going to be over? And, it's so painful because they just went through this
very recently,
less than a year ago. Yeah. They were going through the same thing. I see a lot of people losing their temper with these TSA agents. I just want passengers who are being inconvenienced. And I am one of those passengers who's, standing in long lines. I want them to remember that these people are showing up to work with no pay. I don't know how many of us would do that. I want don't even let, I know you wouldn't.
Well, no, I know you wouldn't is what I was thinking.
Right. And so
the view would be empty.
I want passengers as they stand in these long lines and they get inconvenienced to know that, what TSA agents are going through is far more than an inconvenience. Yeah. It's the worry of not knowing how they're going to feed their families, of how they're going to fill up their gas tanks in order to get to work. Right. It's the uncertainty of being in a job where you are the first line to try to keep people in the air safe. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, you don't know if you can keep your family safe. If you don't know if you can pay your rent, you don't know if you can pay your car, if you can fill your gas, if you can put food on the table, if you can buy medicines. So people need to be patient. I think we can call our congresspeople and tell them to get off their ass and figure out a compromise. Enough is enough. And I just, I honestly, I ask myself, why in the world would anybody even want to be a TSA agent in the United States. It is a thankless job.
Yeah, well, thank God that some people do, because like you said, they're keeping us safe. All right, on that note, we do have to go. Thank you for joining me today,
Is that the
Anna.
happy note?
That's the happy note.
Well, if I feel slightly better than when I began. I think I needed to vent some.
Well, I appreciate that. That's what I'm here for. Tomorrow on the show, we have a fantastic show. We're going to talk a little bit about Tulsi Gabbard, which we didn't get to just now. And then we have an all-new view with Ryan Gosling is here. That's pretty good. So we'll see you then, and see you on Behind the Table next week.
Cuban like I am.
Yes, I know. Everything comes back to you.
It's all about me.
It's all about Anna Navarro. We'll see you soon.
Behind the Table is executive produced by Brian Tetta. Supervising producers are Nathan Getty and Summer Shea. Associate producers are Emily Darcy and Katerina Alexopoulos. And our editor is Brian Davis. And Director of Publicity is Laurie Hogan. From ABC Audio, Trevor Hastings serves as Senior Producer, with Director of Podcast Programming Josh Cohen.